Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, you have absolutely tricked me, trapped me, whatever you want to say. This show, you sent me a text like, oh, I'd like to do a show on this. I'm like, oh, great. This will be easy.
Hmm?
Tony, I have to tell you, I wrote to inform you, this was very much not easy to narrow down the list of the 10 best players of the Ryan Day era at Ohio State. It's like, well, I mean, it's only been so many years. How hard could it be? How many good players could there be, Tony? And it's like, boy, turns out the answer is a lot.
Turns out the answer is a lot, especially if it's just a situation where the player only had to play 1 year under Ryan Day as a head coach. So, like from 2019 to 2024, these are the players, and they could have been anywhere in there. And so that's what we're picking from, and we're going to go back and forth. I'll start with number one, and Tom will go to number two, and then we'll talk it out because there are going to be some names on here that don't make the list, and I'm interested to see how our two lists after the fact compare because I feel like I'm right about mine, but as always with this show, I'm willing to be wrong. Now, I don't know that you can be right in the precise order. I'm just interested to see how close we agree, but my number one player here, Tom, of the Ryan Day era is Chase Young. Now, he only played 1 year under the Ryan Day head coach, not counting the 3 in 2018, but he was the most impactful, most dominating player that I saw since Ryan Day came aboard, and it was a joy to watch him. Offenses had a game plan around him, and sometimes it still didn't work. So that was my number one.
That would have been my number one as well. He just was such a just incredibly dominant defensive player. I grew up watching the New York Giants during the 1980s, and it was a little like watching LT. LT was sort of an outside linebacker, so not exactly the same role, but man, you kind of got the same vibe. It was just, you could just see the opposing offense just going, okay, where is he? Okay, there were plays where you saw three guys blocking him, and that you don't see that. And he was such a dominant player. He had a game with 4 sacks against, I think, Wisconsin at one point. And, Wisconsin's a school that's known for, hey, what is Wisconsin known for? They're known for having a really good offensive line, and they're not against Chase Young, you don't. And yeah, he I think was very clearly the number one to me, even with all the other stuff, just because you saw it on the field, you saw it in terms of stats, you saw it in terms of where he went in the NFL draft. Like everything to me says, yes, Chase Young is number one.
Yeah, 16 and a half sacks, 21 tackles for loss in 12 games. Remember, he missed a couple of games in there for NCAA reasons. So now, Tom, the list, I think, truly begins. Who is the second greatest player in the history of the Ryan Day era?
Can I just completely derail us by going so far off the reservation that you will either agree or call me an absolutely crazy lunatic who needs to be locked up for his own good and for the good of society?
Sounds good to me.
Good. Okay, so Tony, I have another player who's only played 1 year under Ryan Day. Was it 2019? No. Was it 2024? It sure was. Tony, every time we talk about Jeremiah Smith, I feel like we keep talking about him like, yeah, he's a really good player. And it's like, I don't think people understand how great Jeremiah Smith was in just his first year. This started when I was just trying to sort of rank the wide receivers. And I had one name in my head. I'm like, well, he's got to be on the list. And I looked, and that guy was like 5th among this period of wide receivers in terms of total receiving yards. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if that's going to work. And then I was looking at the list of the guys that we were talking about, and it's, the other wide receivers from this era, from the Brian Hartline era, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Garrett Wilson and Jamison Williams. All these guys were number 1 draft picks. This was a stat that came up on a morning show somewhat recently. Jeremiah Smith's freshman year was virtually equal to the other, whatever that was, 5 or 6 guys combined as true freshmen. Like it's not even close. Like These guys are so great, all of them. And you could hear any of their names on this show, and I'd kind of go, yeah, fine, absolutely. One of the 10 greatest players. And Jeremiah Smith has lapped them so many times. It's like, it's like one of those cars. It's like, you're a go-kart and you're like, you can't steer and you're stuck on the wall and people are just zipping around behind you. That's Jeremiah Smith lapping all these other guys who are in this conversation. So yes, it's absolutely ridiculous to have him in this conversation. Yes, I would love to see what he's going to do the next 2 years. At this point, I almost don't care. That freshman season, even if that was a senior season, that would have been like, wow. As a true freshman season, that was so much greater than anyone else that's in the conversation that he's number 2 to me.
Well, maybe we'll eventually do a show of the top 10 players of the Jim Tressel era, because where would Maurice Claret be in there? He played 1 year. But yeah, I also had Jeremiah Smith number 2. So if we two derailings makes a railing, I think is the term there. But watching him, just going back to last spring, Tom, when last spring, like his first spring, when he was just putting on a show, and like you almost have like like applause and from the people watching when there are students there, whether there's parents and coaches there, like every time he put on a show in the spring, and you're like, we need to readjust all of our expectations because we were trying to be conservative. And then you watch him in spring, you're like, that ain't going to work because this dude he's different than everybody. And he was putting on a show constantly. And then he goes out and of course drops his first pass, but whatever, he made up for it. 76 catches, 1,315 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 rushes, 47 yards, another touchdown there. I don't know that this is a controversial pick. It's projection a little, but not much because what he did was so good. I mean, if we're going to allow Chase Young 1 year, no reason we can't allow Jeremiah Smith based on his 1 year. Now, if he goes out the next 2 years and has 36 catches, you're like, well, we can reassess. But right now, yeah, he's my number 2 as well. So now maybe the list truly begins with my number 3 player overall of the Ryan Day era, and that is quarterback Justin Fields. And see, this is one where there's some good quarterbacks to choose from, but Justin Fields was 2-0 as a starter against Michigan. That's where he gets the nod over C.J. Stroud in my mind, but was also really freaking good. Threw for 3,273 yards and 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions the first year. And I remember that first year we're trying to like, again, maybe we're idiots, trying to be conservative. Like, hey, there are going to be some bad games here. He might, like, especially coming off of the spring game where he's like 3 of 14. It's like, don't expect Dwayne Haskins type numbers. Don't expect 75% completion percentage. Then he goes out and has a really good year, plays injured, is tough. And then the next year saves the sport of college football all by his, lonesome with what he was doing. And so he is my number 3 player. I think there's an argument that he's one of the best Ohio State football players of all time. I don't know where you put him, but man, give me that guy every year and I'm going to like my chances.
Yeah, I had him number 3 as well. And, you can look at the stats and there's certainly an argument for C.J. Stroud in this spot. The record against Michigan is such a fraught conversation, given some of the gestures vaguely that may have been happening during C.J. Stroud's 2 years as the starting quarterback. And I feel like the C.J. Stroud conversation, if the defense plays a little better or Marvin Harrison doesn't get knocked out against Georgia in the Peach Bowl, the C.J. Stroud conversation is, C.J. Stroud's probably ahead of Justin Fields. And is that fair to C.J. Stroud? No, absolutely it is not. But I think you're going based off of the results, and the results are that Justin Fields beat Michigan beat Michigan in every opportunity that he was given to
Correct.
beat Michigan.
I think I said 2-0, and that is incorrect. Yeah,
we were all there or weren't there, as the case may be. 2 Big Ten championships. And, again, that era, the Fiesta Bowl against Clemson was, he threw the interception at the end. That wasn't really on him. There were plenty of opportunities. That's a game they should have won, almost won, didn't quite win. But yeah, I would have Justin Fields here just because, just on the whole, what he meant to the program, what he did on the field, the results that you saw, I think he's a pretty good number 3. Now, boy, there's a couple different directions I could go here. There's a guy I could say 4th here, and there's a guy, and I could also see him not being on the list, but we'll save him for later. Let's just do CJ Stroud right here, because CJ Stroud, I think the stats, just the overall, go back to the Rose Bowl against Utah and go, the numbers that he put up in that game, and just the first half of that Michigan State game in 2021, what that looked like. And, even the Georgia game in 2022, no one did that to Georgia's defense. And, this is a Kirby Smart defense, and it's an SEC defense, and they're tough, and he just lit them on fire. And, in that game, one of the last things you saw CJ Stroud do was something you never saw CJ Stroud do, which was run. He had a 25-ish yard run to get them into field goal range. And then they probably played it a little too conservatively after that and ended up missing the kick. But, he did everything he could do to win that game. And boy, if they win that game, if that kick goes in, if they get Ruggles 10 yards closer and that kick goes in, then they almost certainly beat TCU in the national championship game. And CJ Stroud's legacy at Ohio State is very different. And, you look at where he got drafted in the NFL, and you look at how his NFL career has gone, and it's, the talent is just so obvious right there. And I think, given some of what we have learned in retrospect about the Michigan games that cost him a lot of his legacy during his time at Ohio State, I think, this is probably a career that's worth revisiting to a certain degree. But, even before you get to that, just the numbers, the play, everything he was just so great.
I have an issue here where it's like I think he's the best quarterback to ever play at Ohio State. Just like I feel like Sean Springs, I think, is a better cornerback than Antoine Winfield. But if you want me to choose one or the other, I'd say Antoine Winfield is arguably the best defensive player in Ohio State history. So it's like, I think Justin Fields maybe a better offensive player, but CJ Stroud as a quarterback, the accuracy, the timing, he was also tough. Let's not, let's not kid ourselves. Like he got beat up a lot, and then he just kept coming back. And I know people wanted him to run more, and that was always a complaint, but there's never been a better thrower at Ohio State than CJ Stroud. So I'm with you there as well. The first 4 we agree on. And now, Tom, now the list truly begins. Is it your turn?
No, it's your turn.
So this is number 5. This is a guy who was arguably one of the greatest of all time until he was bypassed last year. Number 5, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver, Ohio State, who, before there was Jeremiah Smith, there was Marvin Harrison for 2 years putting on a show, a guy that you needed to bracket and would make ridiculous catches on the sidelines, and we'd chuckle up in the press box about how is that even possible, and we'd make bold predictions about him, and then it's like, well, is that bold enough? Well, probably not, so you got to add something else to him. But Marvin Harrison walked so Jeremiah Smith could run, something to that effect. But yeah, I have Marvin Harrison, number 5, the 5th greatest Ohio State Buckeye of all time, of the Ryan Day era.
Yeah, I like this one. And I have 4 wide receivers. I had Jeremiah Smith listed by himself, and then I have 4 other wide receivers listed here as name/name/name/. And it's just kind of like, what order do you want to pick these guys in? So yeah, Marvin Harrison, I think, is a very good argument for the greatest who's not named Jeremiah Smith of the Ryan Day era. He was the standard bearer where you saw Garrett Wilson, and you saw Chris Olave, and you saw Jackson Smith-Njigba sort of succeed them. And it was like, wow, I can't believe the stuff that he's doing. And then you saw Marvin Harrison succeed Jackson Smith-Njigba. It's like, wow, I can't believe the stuff he's doing. And Jackson Smith-Njigba might be higher on this list had he had a final season like you thought he was going to. The 2022 Jackson Smith-Njigba season is going to be one of the great what ifs of Ohio State football history, I think. But yeah, with what we know, I have no issue with Marvin Harrison Jr. being here. You know, he's one of those guys where, you know, when Jeremiah Smith showed up, we were saying it's not fair to say he's going to be the next Marvin Harrison Jr. There is not going to be a next Jeremiah Smith. I'm just going to say that right now. Like, period, full stop. There is, don't say the next Jeremiah Smith. No, not happening. That's okay. Marvin Harrison Jr. is of the, you know, non-complete alien wide receivers, and he was sort of an alien in and of himself. Just the
he
stuff
was a hybrid.
he was able to do. Yeah, the stuff he was able to do. You know, he came to Ohio State as the son of an NFL Hall of Famer, and it's like, well, boy, that's going to be impossible to live up to. And was just an incredible player, absolutely lived up to the standard of his dad. I think probably exceeded his dad's college stats, I would guess, without going back and looking. And, you know, has now gone on and is playing for the Cardinals in the NFL. But yeah, I think this is a great pick here. So, all right, now I've got to decide if I want to go back to the guy I was about to mention before or someone else. You know what? I'm going with Paris Johnson.
Okay.
I think we got to show the big fellas some love. And he was someone who came in as a true freshman, 5-star. You know, we're talking about the next, you don't want to say the next. I had a picture of Paris Johnson in one of his recruiting visits walking down the tunnel with Orlando Pace. And I remember saying to you, like, well, this is going to get used irresponsibly a bunch. And he wasn't Orlando Pace, because no one's Orlando Pace. But, you know, instead of being a first-year starter on day one and going number 1 in the draft, he was a first-year starter towards the end of the season in the college football playoff and went number 3 in the draft. And, you know, you can be not the next Orlando Pace and still be an incredible player. He stepped in. He played where they needed him to play. He was a guard. He didn't start at tackle until his 3rd year. He wasn't the left tackle of the team until his 3rd year, but then was great there as well. You know, this is one where you don't have the numbers to put on it like you do where you can just say, like, here's Jeremiah Smith's stats. Like, wow, look at these numbers. But man, he came in with some probably a little bit unfair expectations, contributed early, starred late, went on to be a top 5, I think he was number 3, I think, pick by the Cardinals in the NFL draft. So yeah, that's one that I think you have to have an offensive lineman on this team, and I think he's an easy pick for that.
The number 6 pick overall, just looking at his Wikipedia page. But again, what would he have done as a freshman if 2020 wasn't the COVID season? Because that was his freshman year. So would he have eventually broken into the lineup and been an everyday kind of guy? But second team All Big Ten as a right guard as a sophomore, first team All Big Ten, consensus All-American as a left tackle. He is still the guy that I point to when people think you need to pay an offensive line recruit $2 million, $2 million or whatever to get them to sign. And it's like, you got 1 year of starting left tackle out of Paris Johnson, who was a 5-star Ohio offensive tackle recruit. And you only got 1 year of him there. But again, there was the COVID shortened year. And then also not saying he wasn't wasted at right guard, but sometimes just the rest of the lineup has to allow this guy to play left tackle, because I have no doubt he could have played left tackle as a sophomore. Probably could have done what Jordan Seaton did last year at Colorado. When you're the most talented of the guys, go ahead and go out there and learn how to swim out there. So I actually had him as my number 7, right behind my number 6 player, who now becomes our number 7 player because Tom picked these guys out of order, J.K. Dobbins. Mm-hmm. And now J.K. Dobbins only 1 year under Ryan Day, but it was the best year in Ohio State running back history, 2,003 yards. Getting injured in the Clemson game probably cost them, there's so many things probably cost Ohio State in that game in 2020. So he was 17. Yeah, that was the 19 season. Sorry. But yeah, but him getting injured in that game in the 19 season cost them. But when he was incredible as a junior after he figured out the issues going on as a sophomore, where he had the slump with him and Mike Weber. But outstanding as a freshman, like 1,403 yards right out of the gate in 2017. But that 2019 season, where he was also a tremendous pass catcher, was everything that was promised when he was, one of the top running backs in the nation. And I don't think you'll ever see another 2,000-yard rusher at Ohio State. It probably takes 16 or 17 games to get it done, though.
Yeah, he was the guy I had earlier and thought I could say him fourth, or I could see him going a little later. He's the numbers he put up are just, like, as you said, just completely ridiculous compared to what you've seen since then. 2,003 yards, 301 rushing attempts, 21 touchdowns. That was basically Travion Henderson plus Quinshon Judkins from 2024, and it was just one dude doing it all. And that he was just such an incredible player that year. And that was a year that kind of came out of nowhere, because he really did he had a good freshman year and a little bit of a step back as a sophomore. And it was like, well, I guess we'll see what he does in his final year. And I just remember him talking about, just the changes that he had made and really focusing going into that final year. And man, oh man, there was no question about whether he had really done that, because it was a different dude. And he's had injuries in the NFL that have probably limited him to a certain degree. But yeah, that year, unquestionably, he belongs on this list. So yeah, he's a good one, and maybe one we should have said a little earlier. I feel like we have to have another defensive player on this list, Tony. And to me, I mean, there's a lot of guys you could name here, but I look at Jeff Okudah and his career at Ohio State. I mean, they've had a lot of good corners over the years. But Jeff Okudah, he did go number 3. I had to double check that. I was right on this one. He went number 3 in the NFL draft. But man, he on that 2019 team, there were a couple things where, Jeff Hafley left after 1 year, and you could kind of, it was like, well, it's probably not going to be this good next year because you don't have a Chase Young, you don't have a Jeff Okudah. Man, oh man, Jeff Okudah just locked down his half of the field. Was very reliable, always there, just great dude. But just did everything they needed him to do that year. That 2019 Ohio State team, I think, is going to go down in history as one of the more underappreciated ones, because they were so great in so many areas, and they just fell just that much short because in that Fiesta Bowl. That one is always going to be one of the great what ifs, because like you said, there are probably 10 different things that if this one thing doesn't happen, and J.K. Dobbins twisting his ankle, or boy, if they just score one touchdown in that first half and they stop kicking the field goals in the first half, or Chris Olave doesn't break off his route. I mean, there's just so many different things in that game. And would they have beaten that LSU team in the national championship game in New Orleans? I don't know. I think they would have given them a better game than Clemson did. And that's a year where I think the 3 top teams in that year probably win the national championship in several seasons since then. That was just that was a dominant, just an incredible team, which had the great misfortune of playing in a year when there were probably 2 other dominant, incredible teams. And so they fell short of where they would have in a normal year. But Jeff Okudah, I think, was a big part of that.
That's one of the matchups that I wish we could have seen: 2019 LSU offense versus 2019 Ohio State defense. Because I think if any defense in the nation was equipped to keep LSU under 40 points, it was the Ohio State defense. I had a difficult decision because I had him just outside of my top 10. And he's just like holding the spot at 11 until Caleb Downs takes it with one more year. So Chase Young's the only defensive guy on my list, on my top 10, because we got to get to the rest of the wide receivers, basically. And so then it's like, we've got 2 spots left, and I'm going with my last guy on this list. And you could put any guy here. What I keep going back to is I think Garrett Wilson is one of the most underrated players in Ohio State history. Like, he's better than he was able to show, even though he showed how good he was. Like, he also had the COVID shortened year that kind of ruined some of his numbers. But it's hard for me to ignore me asking Garrett Wilson about Jackson Smith-Njigba and saying, yeah, he's the best of all of us. So my number 9 player in the Ryan Day era, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who showed the world how good he was in the Rose Bowl and didn't get a chance to do that the following season. And that's truly unfortunate, but we saw enough of him when we had an opportunity, and then we continue to see more. Not that the NFL matters in any of this, but he is, I still go back to that, the Nebraska game, his true freshman season. Every now and again, I will retweet this because it's video of him getting absolutely lit up by Nebraska on a pass, and the ball goes, gets knocked out, and you can see his eyes like following the flight of the ball as he just got targeted. Like he's still focused on the ball, and it's like that is the level of like concentration and ball awareness that this guy has. And then like 2 plays later is when he has the toe touch in the back of the end zone, and you see like this guy is different. Now he only had 10 catches for 49 yards in 2020, but again, that was a rough year for everybody. And then he came out the next year and lit it up. And it's just unfortunate that we didn't get to see him at full strength in 2021, because that would have been an incredible passing attack for Ohio State.
Yeah, he was the number 1 wide receiver in terms of yardage in a season in Ohio State history by more than 150 yards. He had 1,600 yards in that 2021 season, 95 receptions. Both of those are school records. Had the incredible Rose Bowl, just absolutely insane Rose Bowl. He was just an unbelievable player where it just sort of keeps getting better. You go through the years with the Ohio State wide receiver, and it's like, man, you'll never see another one as good as Chris Olave. Oh, you'll never see another one as good as Garrett Wilson. Oh, you'll never see another one as good as Jackson Smith-Njigba. Oh, you'll never see another one as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. I think we finally like hit the end of that cycle now, where it's like, no, you really, really are never going to see another one as good as Jeremiah Smith. But yeah, I could make a very good argument for any of the 3 wide receivers here: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith-Njigba had like the one season where he just went absolutely thermonuclear. And that last, that 2022 season is just one of the great what ifs. You look at that Georgia game and it's like, well, what if Jackson Smith-Njigba was out there for Ohio State? Boy, that's how would Georgia have defended that? And the answer is, well, they wouldn't have. So that would have, how great would CJ Stroud's numbers look at that point? But yeah, you had that weird hit right out of bounds against Notre Dame in the season opener, and the whole thing just kind of went pear-shaped from that point. So yeah, I like that one. I think that's a very good, easily defensible choice there. I started this list with Garrett Wilson being my number 1, the first wide receiver whose name I wrote down on this list. I don't know if he's going to make the list because, man, I look at Chris Olave's stats, and it's, I think it's just kind of take your pick here. But you look at Chris Olave's stats for his career at Ohio State, and he's right at the top. He's 5th in career receiving yards, 2,711 yards. Just, you think of the big plays over the years, starting with that 2018 Michigan game with the true freshman. He scored a couple touchdowns in the first half as a receiver, and also blocked the punt for a touchdown, and was just such an impactful player over and over and over again. You mentioned the Chase Young 2-game suspension. That reminded me why, for no reason whatsoever, of the incredible onside kick that he recovered against Maryland in that game. That was just incredible. And just you go all the way through to the end of his career, and we're out at the Rose Bowl at the end of the 2021 season, and Garrett Wilson has opted out, and but Chris Olave is still out there practicing with the team, and he didn't play in the game, but he's still out there practicing with the team, like in uniform. And it's like, what is he doing? Like, we kept getting told, like, no, he's not going to play. No, he's not going to play. It's like, well, why is he practicing? It's like, well, he just wants to be out there and just practice with the team and get a few more days of work in with his teammates. And you could tell me that you want to go with Garrett Wilson instead of him. Fine, like that's fine. You want to tell me you want to put Caleb Downs on this list? I'm not going to fight you on that. Like, I had his name written down. One other that I had written down that is a little bit more of a soft factor thing. I think we should have a little bit of a Donovan Jackson conversation, because Donovan Jackson is not, he's not the top 5 NFL draft pick. He's not the, first team All-American. He doesn't have that kind. He obviously didn't have the stats as an offensive lineman, but man, I don't think the 2024 Ohio State football team wins the national championship if Donovan Jackson doesn't go play left tackle and play left tackle the way that Donovan Jackson played left tackle. So I don't know if he was the greatest, but, if you want to have a low-key MVP, designation and have him on this as an honorable mention, I would vote for that.
That's a pretty good one. Like other names that didn't make list, Emeka Egbuka, who has all kinds of stats at Ohio State. I think even a guy like Josh Myers or Pete Werner, like those are some of the guys, because I put a list together of like the top 100, and it's not in a great order because I stopped after like 30 because it's just very jumbled. But, and as I said, Caleb Downs is just holding. He'll be, and then to crack into this top 10, like what does that take? Like that's not an easy thing to do. Travion Henderson, another guy that, deserves some mention, but I think like I'm okay with this 10. Chris Olave he's one of the rare, maybe the only Ohio State Buckeye to never have a 1,000-yard receiving season and yet average over 100 yards receiving in a game, which he did in 2020. Only had 700 and some yards receiving in those games. But there you go. The top 10 players in the Ryan Day era. Number 1, Chase Young. Number 2, Jeremiah Smith. Number 3, Justin Fields. Number 4, C.J. Stroud. Number 5, Marvin Harrison Jr. Number 6, Paris Johnson. Number 7, J.K. Dobbins. Number 8, Jeff Okudah. Number 9, Jackson Smith-Njigba. And number 10, Chris Olave. When you start talking it out, you're like, well, how could you leave out Garrett Wilson? How could you leave out this? And it's like, well, we just did.
Other guys are good. Sorry, it's not my fault.
Yeah, send your letters to Tom Orr. But let us know how you thought what's your top 10 look like? Go ahead and throw it in the comments in the YouTube, or just send Tom an email or hit us up on Twitter. We always appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a 5-star rating and review if you're doing a podcast version of this. We would appreciate it. And of course, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we will be talking about this list on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.